Hello, it's Cathal, Daly. I'm sure you're very familiar with the honey-tongue voice. A lot of the altar boys certainly are. But I suppose Protestant churches are like brothels, full of eunuchs. Nice buildings, but the people inside aren't qualified to do the business. You might be wondering what a senior member of the Catholic Church is doing, giving this statement over the air. But if that fucker, Bishop Pat Buckley, can say wedding mass in a nightclub in Bangor, then I can come and reach out to some young people. Don't worry, I don't mean reaching out in that sense, of course. Let me tell you a little Bible story. One day Jesus came across a crowd of women throwing stones. No, he wasn't in Ballymurphy, sir. They were throwing stones at a young woman. So we went over to them, a bit like Jerry Adams calming down the rioters in Interment Anniversary Day, and asked them what were they up to. "We're stoning this whore, Mary Magdalene, to death," the woman said. So Jesus says, "Fair enough, but let any one of you who is without sin cast the first stone." Immediately this wee woman logs over a big breeze block, says, "This'll sort you out, you old bitch," and drops it on Mary Magdalene's head. So Jesus goes over to her and says, "You know, mother, sometimes you really piss me off." I suppose the only people who were laughing then were the Catholics. I take it yous prods don't know that Mary was born without original sin. Well, you will soon learn when Martin McGuinness is Minister for Education. Well, one woman who is definitely a sinner is that fucking old bitch Sinead O'Connor, or Mother Bernadette Mary. Well, there's something about Bernadette Mary that really annoys my arse. It took me 7 years to study to become a priest, and she gives a bishop 100 grand, pays for his hernia operation, and gets ordained straight off. A hernia operation. I suppose it's a case of, in God we trust. Anyway, before I became a qualified priest, I learned how to do weddings, funerals, and hear confessions. I was taught to give 5 Hail Marys for a bit of thieving, 10 Our Fathers for masturbation. One day I heard this boy confess an awful sin, so I asked the parish priest for advice. I said, "Father, what do you give a young boy who sins with his mouth?" And he replied, "I don't know about you, but I usually give him a tenner and a bag of raspberry ruffles." I don't know if I'm talking to anyone from County Tyrone. One of my first concessions ever I had was in Lisnaskea. This farmer came into the confessional and he told me he liked to hump pigs. So I took a deep breath and I asked him whether he humped male or female pigs. "Female, of course," he replied. "What do you think I am, a fucking pervert?" I can, however, tell you that, unlike Bishop Buckley, I have never officiated at a mixed marriage. A young Catholic man once told me that he was considering getting married to a Protestant. So I told him that I was worried if he did so, he would suffer terrible repercussions. "What do you mean, Father? Are you worried that my family will disown me? Or the paramilitaries will target us?" "No, my son," I told him. "That bastard Graham Reed might write a play about you." Speaking of weddings, did you see the royal wedding in June? I was a bit worried that Prince Edward's ring was a bit too loose. Reminded me of my favourite altar boy, Seamus. I was at a wedding recently and the bride was showing me her wedding presents. Unfortunately, the hinge of her microwave door had come loose. So I said, "Don't worry about that, I can give you a screw for that microwave." But she replied, "No thanks, Father, but I'll give you one of those toasters for a blowjob." Of course, nowadays people will believe any scandal about the Catholic Church. Years ago it was different. My aunt told me that she used to live opposite a house. One night she had her best friend round for tea. As they were drinking their cup of Lipton's finest, my aunt looked out the window and saw a Presbyterian minister going into the house. Her friend says, "Look at that old Presbyterian, a filthy old whore chaser." 10 minutes later, a Church of Ireland bishop arrives. My aunt's mate says, "Look at him. Even the proddy bishops are at it." 10 minutes later, the parish priest arrives at the door of the brothel. "Holy Mary, Mother of God," says my aunt, "there must be someone sick in there." But before I go, I want to warn all young people out there about the evils of contraception. The Catholic Church is totally opposed to these artificial devices which prevent procreation. All life is sacred, from erection to the resurrection. And I'm sad to say that a very prominent Catholic politician, a Belfast MP no less, has been using these rubber johnnies. He told me at confession that he had been protecting his weapon ever since one of his women friends caught syphilis and bled to death. But surely, I asked, in this day and age, you can't bleed to death from syphilis. And he replied, you can if you give it to me. And finally, I would like to apologise on behalf of the Catholic Church to all the pain that we have caused to gay men. The next time, we'll use KY. Good night, God bless.